Welcome, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Toomey. This is the CSF Alumni webinar on financial aid. I'm the Director of Communications at CSF, and we have a great panel of young leaders and CSF President's Council members and other education experts who are going to be speaking with us tonight about financial aid, and I hope that you'll all get lots of information, but you'll have plenty of time to ask questions of the panelists after they present their information to you. But just a quick word before we begin about the CSF Alumni Network. Everybody who is invited here tonight is an alumnus of the Children's Scholarship Fund. So that means they used a CSF scholarship when they were attending kindergarten through 8th grade at some point. And we always like to stay in touch with our alumni after they graduate from 8th grade and do everything we can to share resources and opportunities throughout high school and college, and hope that we can just do anything to help you on your journey through the education and career paths that you pursue. Also, just a little bit about the Young Leaders Board and President's Council. Those are donors to CSF, and they're also volunteers who share their time as well as their treasure, helping all of our alumni and students and schools. So we're very grateful for them too. And also for any alumni who are watching tonight, this is just the first of a series of events that we're going to be holding throughout the year. So watch out in your email for upcoming events. The next one on the calendar is going to be a trivia night that we're planning for Tuesday, October 26th. And you can also keep up with us on social media. So like us on Instagram and Facebook. On Instagram, we're at CSF New York. And on Facebook, it's at Scholarship Fund. So we're going to go through some presentations from the panelists at the beginning. I'm going to introduce all the panelists first, and then we'll have the first presentation. And then after all the panelists have spoken, we'll have time for questions and answers. But as any questions occur to you throughout this whole hour, please feel free to share them in the chat. And whenever they occur to you, and we will answer them when the time comes. So I'm going to introduce everybody first. We have Fausto. He graduated from Columbia University with no student loan debt, and he has dedicated his professional career to helping families in New York City identify the best educational opportunities for their children. And Mustafa is a Young Leaders Board member who works at Cornerstone Research, and he graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. Rico is a President's Council member who is an associate at Paul Weiss, and he's a graduate of Virginia Tech and Georgetown University Law Center. Michelle Ferrugian, who is not on the screen yet, but she will be joining us soon. She's a Young Leaders Board member who works for Geller and Company, and she studied at Binghamton University in upstate New York. And last but not least, we have Natalie Jean-Baptiste. She's a bankruptcy attorney who runs a student debt counseling service, and she graduated from Fordham University and earned a law degree from NYU. So as you can see, we have some very, very expert panelists tonight. So can't wait to hear what they have to say. So with that, we'll turn it over to Fausto, and please go ahead. And I see that Michelle has also joined, so we're all here now. So go ahead, Fausto.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. So if you could just let me know if it's visible to everyone. Yes, okay, excellent. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to essentially learning a little bit about financial aid, right? Learning how to pay for college. My name is Fausto Jimenez Evans, and I'm an education consultant. Right now, I'm actually the high school placement director at the Manhattan Country School. But most recently, I was actually the director of TRIO Student Support Services at the College of Mount St. Vincent. And what that means is that I ran a federally funded program, and part of my responsibilities actually included ensuring that my students were financially literate and that I was helping my students and their families complete their financial aid applications. So we'll go ahead and start learning a little bit about the different types of federal and private financial aid available to families. So Grants and scholarships, for example, are need-based. Scholarships, excuse me, some grants and scholarships are need-based. They can also be merit-based. So need-based meaning that you apply for it, the school analyzes your family's financial situation, and then merit-based means that the scholarship or the grant is given to you on the basis of either academic achievement, athletic achievement, artistic achievement. So there are really a variety of grants and scholarships. Grants and scholarships are financial aid that does not have to be repaid. So that is given to you. Work study funds, essentially a work study program through which you earn funds to help you pay for college, for your tuition, and for any other educational expenses. Federal and private loans are also available. Loans are borrowed monies from the federal government or from a bank. With a loan, or with loans, I should say, you must repay them back. And oftentimes you pay them back with interest, which means that you pay back with a little bit more. As I was mentioning, grants are usually need-based and come from federal, state, or college funds. You will notice on this sheet that some of the words, some of the terms are green and underlined. At the end of this, I will make sure to share my presentation so that then it can be distributed amongst everyone. And so all of those green terms are essentially hyperlinks that you can go ahead and click on. So grants that are available, for example, are the federal Pell Grant, which is determined based on your family's financial situation. And again, the operative word here is federal, meaning that it comes from the federal government. There's also, for example, for New York State residents, New York Tuition Assistant Program, or you may hear it referred to as TAP. There's also the Federal Supplementation Educational Opportunity Grants, or FSEOG, which are a little less common, but it's something that you should definitely ask your financial aid counselor at your high school, or even once you get into college about. And then there's grants like the Teach Grant, for example, which has very strict requirements. Scholarships are mostly merit-based, but some of them, again, are based on your financial need. They usually come from nonprofit institutions, so outside institutions that award scholarships. They may come from the college's own funds, and even from some corporations. One thing to keep in mind is that applying for scholarships is absolutely free. So you shouldn't have to pay anyone to complete a scholarship application. So nonprofits, for example, are the United Negro College Fund, the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, for example. Corporations like Coca-Cola or McDonald's give out scholarships. And for some of you, whose families may have certain bank accounts with certain banks like JP Morgan Chase, or are part of workers unions or credit unions, those may also have financial aid and scholarships available. Work study. Work study, kind of like the name says, you work and you study. So it provides part-time jobs or the funds rather, for part-time jobs for undergraduates and graduate students with demonstrated financial need. Generally, you would get a part-time job. They're usually on campus. It is important that you apply early in the semester because those jobs do run out quickly. And it's important that you track your hours and your funds. If your funds, for example, initially said that you are going to be awarded $1,000, but you may need more, please make sure that you speak with your financial aid counselor. Loans. As I said a little bit earlier, loans are funds that are lent to you and therefore must be repaid with interest. And again, interest is a little bit more amount on the amount that you borrowed. So there are different types of loans. There's the federal direct subsidized loans, for example, which is based on your financial need. You do not pay or accrue interest until after graduation. So that is a subsidized loan because it is subsidized by the taxpayers. We want to make sure that you get your college education, that you are not worrying about having to pay those or accruing those interest, that interest while you are in school. There's also the federal direct unsubsidized loan. The amount is not necessarily based on financial need. And if you, for whatever reason, may need a little bit more, you need to make sure that you speak with your financial aid counselor. Interest for unsubsidized loans does indeed accrue while you're still studying, while you're still in school. There's also the federal direct plus loan for graduate or professional students and parents of dependent and undergraduate students. So again, for graduate school students, or your parent can take out that loan, can take on that responsibility in order to help you pay for your tuition. There are also federal direct consolidation loans, which allow you to combine all eligible federal loans that generally that comes after your college career. And then there's also, so again, it's important to understand the difference between private and federal loans as well. Private loans generally are unsubsidized. They may accrue interest while you're in college. In order to apply for financial aid, you have to ensure that you visit the Federal Student Aid website or studentaid.gov. Apply for your student aid ID because you need that in order to complete and electronically sign your FAFSA and any other student aid documents. Complete the online free application for federal student aid. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Operative word, free. You do not have to pay anyone to complete this information. The information that you provide in that application then determines whether you are eligible for federal financial aid and the amount that you are qualified to receive. So after you complete your FAFSA, you should receive your student aid report or your STAR report, which will indicate how much federal aid you are entitled to receive and how much your family can expect to pay. That isn't not all schools. So schools sometimes, I should say, colleges and universities try to adhere to those numbers, but that is not necessarily always the case. When you are applying for federal financial aid, there are a few documents that you need to make sure that you have with you. So the student and the parent or guardian's social security number, the student and the parent or guardian's dates of birth, the student's driver's license number, if the student has one, that's just another form of ID, a student's permanent registration number if the student is not a US citizen. So permanent residents are also completely qualified to receive federal financial aid. You would need a copy of your parent or guardian's 2020 federal income tax returns. So the 1040s, the 1040A, the 1040EZ, and the W-2s. You would also need a copy if you as a student are working, you would need a copy of your 2020 federal income tax return, in addition to any W-2s that you may have. There may be additional documentation that some schools require, like bank statements, or they also want to know if your family has any investments. So if your family is a family of means, the government wants to make sure that they are giving to everyone what it is that they need. Something to note is that all males between the ages of 18 and 25 are required to register for selective service in order to receive federal financial aid. We won't get into that right now. We can get into the politics of that later. Applying for state and other aid. In New York State, all New York State residents are eligible to receive the New York State Tuition Assistance Program or the TAP grant. And so you would have to complete a separate application for that as well. Make sure that you are checking all of your college financial aid websites for additional documentation that they may require. And some schools may actually also require the CSS profile, which stands for College Scholarship Service. The CSS profile is not free to complete, but there are fee waivers that your family can request. Ensure that you're applying for New York State awards and any other scholarships that you may be eligible for. Apply to external scholarships as well. I cannot impress that enough. There's a lot of money out there especially for first year, for students who are going into college for their first year. And of course, complete any loan applications that may be required of you. So I'll go ahead and give you some insider tips, both from my own experience and from understanding the experience of a lot of the families that I've worked with. So one thing to keep in mind is that this is pretty much one of the only times in your life when you are going to get free money. When I say free money, I literally mean money that you are entitled to, because of your family's financial situation, or even scholarships. Some scholarships, all they require may be that you send in a report card or just an essay or a combination of those two, or they may just ask you, what it is that you're interested in. So there are scholarships, for example, for students who know how to knit. So apply to as many scholarships as you possibly can. It is absolutely important that you do. You never know which one you may get. Apply early. Make sure that you're applying for scholarships and for financial aid early. This helps not just to make sure that you are being dispersed the amount that you need, that you are not, that the college or the university also is not running out of financial aid dollars. And then it also means that if there's any problem, if the college or the university needs to contact you about any missing documents, you have time to ensure that those are in. Request fee waivers. A lot of students sometimes feel that they have to pay for college applications or the SATs or the CSS profiles on their own. There are fee waivers for all of these things. I would say consider staying in state. Again, if you're from New York, for example, there are certain state grants that you can receive. And for some public colleges, the tuition is actually also reduced. Get to know financial aid officers at your interested colleges. Financial aid officers love to talk about financial aid. Their job is to give you money. And so they would be happy to answer any questions that you may have to ensure that you are receiving the grants that you need. I would say apply to big universities or what some may deem as reach universities. Some students may self-select out and may feel like, oh, I don't think my grades are good enough for Columbia, for example, or for Harvard. And then it may turn out that they are. And these big colleges and some reach universities often have more funding available to them. Make sure that you are checking the financial aid websites of all of the colleges that you are applying to. Once again, I said a little bit earlier, in case they need any additional documentation, or the CSS profile, which again is not free, but there are fee waivers for. Something another tip that I would give you is to help to develop start to develop your financial literacy. If you don't necessarily know about what a budget is or how to budget, if you don't know what the term compound interest means, if you don't know what debit or credit means, if you need to know the difference between a checking and a savings account, please, there are tons of resources on the internet. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Google, you can go on Wikipedia, and these will give you often a very basic idea. What are some resources that are available to students and families? Again, colleges and universities, their financial aid officers want to talk to you about financial aid and want to make sure that they are answering all of your questions. Please step into your network. Your high school guidance counselor is going to be an immense resource, an immensely rich resource, I should say. Once you are in college, it's important to speak with first-year college student advisors. So in a lot of colleges and universities, there are advisors specifically for first-year students or freshmen, for the freshman class, to help you transition from high school into your first year of college. And your financial aid officer should become one of your best friends while you are in college, and even beforehand. There is a lot of government support. So for some students, they may actually qualify for the Higher Educational Opportunity Program, or HEOP. And I believe that in some of the public schools, it is called, in a public university or college, it is called EOP. Make sure that you are looking into that. If you qualify for that, ask. There's also a lot of federally funded support. So as I was saying, I was most recently the director of TRIO Student Support Services at the College of Mount St. Vincent. My job was to ensure that my students were financially literate. My job was to ensure that all of our students transitioned well between high school and their first year of college. And my job was to ensure that my students graduated within their goal. Their designated amount of time, between 4 and 6 years. So please make sure that you are asking if there's a TRIO Student Support Services program at your college or university. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and wrap up here. If there are any questions, please make sure that you are submitting them. And if for whatever reason you have more questions about financial aid, the financial aid process, or college, please feel free to contact me at fausto@caa.columbia.edu, and I will do my best to answer your email and even give you references or resources, and then reference back to where I receive the information from. So thank you so very much for listening to me today. And once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them to Elizabeth.
Thanks so much, Fausto. That was really amazing. Such a lot of information. And I will repeat again, Fausto said, we will share this presentation with everybody after the event. We'll email it to all of you. So, don't feel that you missed it if you didn't take every note, if you didn't take notes all the way through. Well, so as Fausto said, if you have any questions, you can certainly type them into the chat, and we'll ask them right now if you have a question for Fausto. And if you want to wait, until everybody's gone, we'll have another Q&A session. So I do see that we have a question, and it's one I was going to ask too, actually. So Latoya is saying, how early should you apply for scholarships? Do you wait until 12th grade or before?
So there are some scholarships that are actually available for students as a junior year. I would say that freshman and sophomore year of high school may be a bit early. There may be some, but generally as of junior year, that's when students really become sort of qualified, right? Yeah, students sort of become qualified for those. So for example, there are some like science-based or research-based scholarships that are available as of junior year, but most of them open up in a senior year. Some of them may have due dates while the college applications are due. Most of them, I would say, actually are due after the college applications are due, so that it gives you enough time and space in your mind to be able to complete them.
So that's good. So if you are a 12th grader and you're applying to college, you kind of wait until after you've been accepted and when you know where you're going before you actually apply to financial aid, or is it?
No. Financial aid, make sure that you're completing your financial aid application, the FAFSA or the CSS, the fall of your senior year of high school. Scholarships, however, are generally due. So I think university or college applications are due either in December or early January. Mm-hmm. So the scholarship applications are generally due later in January, February, or March. So you should not be waiting to hear from your colleges first. You should just be applying to scholarships on your own.
Okay, great. Well, I don't see any other questions right now, but so we'll move on to the next panelist. But again, keep the questions coming, and we'll answer them at the Q&A section. So next up, we're going to hear from Mustafa. So please go ahead and Mustafa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mustafa. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, where I studied mathematical economics and statistics. I graduated from there in 2019 and have been working at a firm called Cornerstone Research in New York City since then. My background is somewhat unique in that I did not actually grow up in the US. So I started college as an international student. And as a result, I did not fill out the FAFSA. I actually submitted the CSS profile. So I'll leave any and all FAFSA questions to the experts, but if there are any CSS profile related questions, I'm happy to answer those since I filled that out 4 times in college. In addition to that, I just wanted to share some tips that helped me navigate financial aid and budgeting in college and share some of those tips with you. And of course, if you have any questions, definitely let us know. So the first thing I want to mention is to start the conversation about finances with your family as early as possible. So from my experience, there was a lot of documentation that was needed for my financial aid application that actually took some time for my parents to put together and gather for me. So the earlier that you start, the more stress-free that experience will be. So starting early is going to make the process a lot smoother. So don't wait until your financial aid applications are due to start working on the application. Start at least a couple weeks or even months before they're actually due. As part of that, start the conversation with your parents about how much they are able to pay for college, and think about that when you're making decisions about which schools to apply to. Of course, there's lots of grants and scholarships available, as Fausto just mentioned, but having that conversation with your parents or guardians early will give you the opportunity to decide what kinds of schools you should be aiming for and how much financial aid you might need to apply for, and be able to conduct your research on financial aid policies in a way that's more targeted than if you hadn't had that conversation with your parents or guardians. So definitely start early. Another tip that I wanted to share, and this echoes something that Fausta had mentioned, is that colleges have a lot of money, and always ask for it. Your financial aid officer, the financial aid office, they always have money through grants that they are able to give to students, and all you have to do is ask. And the worst thing that can happen is someone might say no, and you're no worse off than you were before, but you may end up being better off just by asking. So definitely ask about any grants that might be available for things like your college financial aid office might have a technology grant that they may give to students. So you might be able to buy a laptop using that grant, or they may even provide a grant for buying textbooks. So definitely ask about those things. And often you can find that there is money that can be given out that you might just not be aware of. And I know people who've been able to get grants like this, even get additional loans, or even increase the amount of financial aid that they've gotten through their college just by asking for more money. So definitely ask if you can. Something else I wanted to share was that I worked all semesters throughout college, and I wanted to share some tips about the work-study experience and some ways to manage that with your course load. So most of my jobs in college were research assistant positions. So that allowed me the opportunity to, one, get some research experience, and two, be able to make some money that I could use for my weekly spending. Something I want to mention here is that some students may find it challenging to balance their course load with working part-time in college. And to that, I would mention that there are a lot of jobs where you're essentially being paid to do homework. So look for jobs where you can just be at the library front desk, and all you have to do is maybe check books in and out. And you could be getting paid to do homework for 90% of your time there. So look for jobs like that if you find it challenging to balance your course load with working part-time. And also think about work-study jobs as an opportunity to gain valuable experience that you can leverage to get jobs during the summer after your junior year, or as internships, or even after you graduate from college. So work-study jobs are actually a great tool to not just make money, but also build your skills and become more employable. So to the extent that that opportunity is available to you, definitely reap the benefits of it. Another thing I want to mention is that there's often lots of free money and opportunities on campuses. And if you go to a research university, for example, there are often labs where you can just participate in research and make money from participating in those studies. So at my school, a popular option was taking studies at the psychology lab or the behavioral research lab, where you could make up to $60 an hour just from participating in research. So definitely seek out those opportunities, especially if you're at a research university. Other resources that were available were that my college also had a first-generation low-income student that had a food pantry. So for students who were on campus throughout holidays, for example, this was a way to not have to spend on food when the dining halls were closed. You could just go to the pantry and get some staples from there. So definitely another thing to look out for. And once you start college, there will usually be a fair of some sort where you're introduced to all the different opportunities and resources available on campus. And as you're going around looking for clubs to join, also look for things like a first generation or low income student center, or any resources of the sort where there are resources for students like yourself. Another thing I want to mention is that it's okay to say no to expensive activities and suggest some free activities to friends instead. Oftentimes people feel the pressure of participating in a very expensive social culture in college. That doesn't have to be the case. Everyone cannot afford very expensive outings and meals. So it's totally okay to say no, and you you will experience the fear of missing out, but you're not going to miss out on much, as you'll realize after you've said no once. So definitely feel comfortable and confident saying no, and then suggest some free or cheaper activities instead. And this is something that really helped me get through college. In terms of budgeting, I would suggest keeping your money for essential expenses versus discretionary expenses separate from each other. So if you have to pay, if you live off campus, for example, and you have to pay rent, don't mix that money with the money that you'd spend on meals or outings, for example. So keep your rent money separate and keep your discretionary expenses, money for discretionary expenses separate, so that you don't run the risk of eating into your budget for necessary expenses. And one way, there are some apps that can actually help you keep track of your expenses. One of those is Mint, that I've personally used a lot and I still use, which I found to be very helpful. So it's just a good way to keep track of all of your finances in one place. And I also wanted to reiterate something that Fausta had mentioned, is that while you're in college learning about art history or physics or economics, use that time to also develop financial literacy and learn about personal finance. So while you're in college, it's also a good time to be thinking about your long-term financial goals and thinking about building credit. So once you graduate college, you might need to rent an apartment, or you might need to buy a car. And for all of those things, you will need to have good credit. And college is actually an excellent time to start building your credit, because there are a lot of banks and credit card companies that will offer credit cards to students, which usually have very low to no fees and will often include incentives for performing well in school. So use that opportunity to build your credit, so that once you graduate college, that's not a constraint on your ability to rent an apartment or buy a car, for example. And the last thing I want to mention is that when you're in college, you'll be, this might be the first time that you're doing your taxes, and it can be very daunting. So start as early as you can, start collecting your documents. It will take much longer than you think, and definitely start working on your taxes early. This is an important life skill that you're developing, and use it as that, because you'll be doing it multiple times after college. So that's all I had to mention. Yeah.
That was a lot, Mustafa. Thank you. Wonderful tips, and a very common theme that you have to start early and gather your documents and be prepared. And that's true all through life. And a good reminder that colleges do have so many resources, and it may not be apparent when you look at your financial aid package, or that there are all these hidden opportunities like food pantries or research labs that offer $60 an hour for you to be the subject of a study, and just from my memory, so many just free receptions and free activities that you really don't need to go in onto these expensive activities or social gatherings. There are so many free things on offer all the time, and so many great people to meet. So thank you so much for all of those tips. Wonderful information. And now we're going to move on to Rico. Rico, please go ahead.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Just that thing about being so many free resources. Like, a lot of the people I knew in college were broke college students. We really lived that lifestyle. So we did all the free stuff. Almost everybody I seen show up to all the free food events. So yeah, that is very much a thing in college. But also just on the point of starting early, that is critical. Being prepared, like doing that work up front, is critical. And also even taking that extra 30 minutes, that extra couple hours, that extra day or so to like really plan and execute of what you plan to do before college, during college, after college, is just critical to being able to set yourself up for success and one, managing your how to pay for college, but also just taking that skill set and translating it to the rest of your life. I guess before I even get into like the things I wanted to talk about, I should probably tell you a little bit about me. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. I was a first generation college student, first generation law student as well. I guess that kind of goes hand in hand. Oh, and the point that Fausto made earlier about the fee waivers, a ton of fee waivers. I got fee waivers when they didn't even have fee waivers anymore. I ran out of my fee waivers and I started emailing schools saying, hey, I don't have any more fee waivers, but can I apply to your school and can you send me a fee waiver? It works. If you write a compelling enough email, you get on the phone with somebody and they just like, oh, I just want to help. It works. I got a ton of fee waivers that way. Ended up going to Virginia Tech. So ended up going to Virginia Tech, got my degree in finance. I went there on a full scholarship. So I finished Virginia Tech with no debt. After Virginia Tech, though, I went to Georgetown. I had a mixture of scholarships, grants, and loans. I guess to be fully transparent, I finished Georgetown with like somewhere around $180,000 in debt. And also, I guess now I have a donor advised fund where I work with nonprofits to give scholarships, like to give scholarship money to students. So like I say all that to just say that I've kind of like seen a lot of aspects of this like college financial journeys from finishing undergrad with no debt to finishing law school with a ton of debt to giving away scholarship money. So I've kind of seen it from a lot of different vantage points. And I think the things that I thought if I could talk to myself before, one, I would have listened to everything that was said before me because I could have saved myself a whole bunch of headaches. But I think in addition to that, like one thing, well, it's a few things, it's three things, like definitely like being thoughtful and strategic and just doing that extra work that work to prepare before you even start, like while you're applying for colleges, but before you even start applying for college. It was been said so many times, but I can't stress it enough. Apply for the scholarships, the money is there. And another thing, just having a strategy for paying off debt. And a lot of people, I'm not gonna say a lot, some people may think that starts when you graduate. That starts before you even start school. So I guess on that first point, paying for college, I like to walk into things and I like to tell people to walk in things with your eyes open. So, and doing the homework at the outset. So like, let's say you want to be an engineer, like an easy thing to do if you're figuring out how you're going to finance college, figure out what engineers make. Okay, this is what an engineer makes. Then figure out, okay, look into the schools that you're potentially applying to. These are what the engineers from this school, this is what they tend to do, their first job after graduation. And even most schools will make this information available. These are what the engineers from this particular school makes after graduation. And that'll give you a particular parameter of what you could possibly expect. Because I wouldn't say money is the most important factor when picking a school, but good financial stewardship is just a critical skill in almost everything, and including this process. And if you go in there with your eyes open, okay, this is what I want to do. And it might change. And if it changes, can just redo this process. But if you go into the process saying, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm thinking about doing after graduation. These are what the people who already did this process before me did. These may be some potential avenues for me. Let me be smart about like what that journey look like for them, or the cost of tuition versus what I'm going to make, and make that a part of my assessment of like what college I choose or what my path will be after that point. So I think that is critical. And then another part that's like, and I hate to say it, but it's often missed, is the applying for scholarships part. Like I've seen it on both sides. I remember when I was applying for scholarships, it was tough work. It was like you had to find the money, then you had to send all these letters out and hope people respond. You did it for a couple days and just like, oh yeah, I'm done. I did all this application. I did these applications. I'm good with this. But I'm telling you now, there's so many scholarships out there. There's so much money out there that people are just leaving on the table. And I know this. Just last year, I could name off the top of my head like 30 people with scholarships that had to extend their deadline because people weren't applying. People weren't applying to free money because I can't tell you. I tried to wrap my head around it, but I just can't. Like, there's just a lot of free money out there that people aren't applying for. And that should also be a part of your journey, is looking for those scholarships. I know it takes a lot of time, but think about it as a job. Like if you apply and you get a $10,000 scholarship, and you had to, yes, you maybe had to look for scholarships for 3 or 4 days. 3 or 4 days, $10,000. I take that job. So look at it like that. And I'm telling you from like the side of somebody who gives scholarships, that there are a lot of scholarships out there that aren't being applied for. Or maybe you are giving 2 or 3 scholarships and 2 or 3 people apply. So you give the 2 or 3 scholarships to the people that apply. And then I think I might be coming up with that. So another part is just paying off debt. So my general rule of thumb, and I use this and my friends use this, is I would not borrow more money for school than I expected to make my first year. I don't know if that's true across the board, but in general, from the people I've talked to about it, that's been the rule of thumb we follow. And while you're in school, it may feel like a stretch, but you'll thank yourself when you're paying back debt. So another thing, I'm not of an opinion how fast you pay off debt. Like that's a personal, in my mind, that's a personal choice. I do have very, very strong opinions of knowing what you're doing and like having an understanding of and having a plan for your debt. So, I mean, I think you go into everything with your eyes wide open. You finish school, you know how much debt you have, you know what your interest rate is. You consider maybe consolidating or refinancing, but you at least have a plan. You understand what your debt burden is. I think that's critical. And then might be out of time. So I think another thing is, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah,
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but a lot of great information there, and we'll get to more in the Q&A. But I think Natalie will have a lot of a lot of relevant information to cover where you're talking about the debts and loans. But thank you. And key point to remember, I think, from Rico is that, as somebody who is giving scholarships himself, it is important to actually apply. You see all of these scholarships, and some of them have very specific requirements, and there's chances are very good that you meet some of the qualifications for some scholarship out there perfectly, and not that many other people might be applying. So go ahead and apply. Okay, next up we have Michelle, and so please take it away, Michelle.
Well, I gotta say, Mustafa and Fausto and Rika did such a great job in providing so many good details. But in just relation to like my own experience, to give everyone an idea, I went to SUNY Binghamton, which happens to be a state school. So I was lucky enough that my parents applied for the FAFSA. I got a Pell Grant, which covered some of the tuition. My tuition was small enough to begin with, which was manageable. But I had no idea about any of the stuff that was discussed. Asking for waivers, even just to apply to school. I limited the schools that I applied to only because I thought I had to actually pay for each school I applied to. Imagine if you were able to apply for school for free. Like everyone should be thinking in their radar, free, free, free. Like that's something that you want to go and grab. That's a gimme. Definitely reach out to them. Say, you have to court the schools a little bit. Hey, I really liked your school, but I feel like I can't really apply because of this little hindrance. You want to help me? I mean, I wish I had known that. And then secondly, in terms of scholarships, like to what everyone else mentioned, apply. What's the worst that can happen? At that point, it's a numbers game. The more you apply to, the more likely the chance that you might actually get something. So don't ever psych yourself out thinking that you might not be able to get it because you're not qualified. How would you know? Just send it in and see what happens. And 3, also, in terms of like paying for college, I started working when I was 16 and my first job was at TJ Maxx. I was the person who was marking down all of the items. I mean, a lot of the times you don't even think about getting your first job, but that was like my first experience into like what the real world was like and how much a dollar actually is worth. Like, oh my God, back then, $7 just to mark down everything and you're standing for over an hour. Whew. But that's something that you could think about, not only just, employment at school, but also what you can do outside of school and what you can do actually now, because it's going to give you something to put on your resume. It's going to give you a little bit more framework in terms of work ethic. And then you could carry that along in college, especially when you're looking for internships. I mean, imagine that you're getting experience to add to your resume to get better jobs in the future, along with getting paid along the way. But definitely take advantage of everything that's available to you. Make sure that you're just open-minded to grabbing out to those opportunities, and to think that you have such a wonderful panel right now telling you about all the ways that you could save money. Like, these are freebies. I wish I was in your shoes to redo all of this to be able to make these wiser decisions. And I think just one last point in terms of scholarships, if you get 2 scholarships from 2 schools that you really love, you're allowed to negotiate a little bit to say, hey, you know what, I got this scholarship from the school. I really like your school. Can you do something where you could like maybe match it? Because I would really love to be in this location. Again, always you're in a position where like you have choices. So feel free to use them.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Michelle. And now, last but not least, we have Natalie. Please go ahead, Natalie.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. As you know, I was introduced. My name is Natalie Jean-Baptiste. I'm a solo practitioner. I'm based on Long Island, New York, where I specialize in bankruptcy and student debt. I do have a brief presentation, so I'd like to share my screen with you. So hold on one moment. Let me figure this out. Hold on. Okay, hold on. Start the screen share. Hold on. There we go. Share. Can you guys see my screen now? Do you see the presentation? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'll start with my why, and why I do this work is that I believe that education should not be a death sentence. Meaning, you know, we pursue higher education because we want to improve our lives and open doors and have better opportunities. But a lot of times, because of the cost of higher education, you find yourself in a struggle because of your degree, right? So you come out of school, you're burdened with all this debt, and you know, you're like a hamster in a wheel just trying to pay it back. So, you know, my belief is that that should not be the way. Education should open doors and give you opportunities to create a better life for yourself. So I'll share a little bit of my story with you. This is me in 2004 at my law school graduation. And on this day, you couldn't tell me that I wasn't going to be like queen of the world and rule everything. I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. And even throughout law school, I interned for big record companies, entertainment lawyers. And I thought, you know, I was just going to hang out with rock stars and make a lot of money, right? And I wasn't even worried about my student loans. I graduated law school with probably about $150,000 of debt from, you know, both my undergrad and law school degree. So, you know, I did get my foot in the door in the entertainment industry right out of law school. But I wasn't making the kind of money that I wanted, but I was hanging out with rock stars. So this is me and Usher at some release party for one of his, either his albums or something. So I'm hanging out and partying with rock stars. This is me with Common. And then this is me with little Steven Van Zandt. He plays guitar with Bruce Springsteen. I used to get floor seats to Springsteen shows. So I'm out here living my best life. So from the outside looking in, you know, I just look like I'm living the dream. But deep down, I'm drowning in debt. I have a ton of credit card debt that I started accumulating while I was in college, because they don't do this anymore. But in the 90s, they used to throw credit card applications at college students. And, you know, the interest rates are disgusting. They're not, you know, back then they weren't trying to make it, you know, nice and affordable for you. You know, they were still beating you over the head with high interest rates. So, you know, I started accumulating credit card debt in college, you know, and then of course it accumulated throughout law school and then afterwards. So I had a bunch of debt, you know, not only student loan debt, but, you know, regular consumer debt. And I also had medical bills because I was struggling with some medical issues as well. So fast forward a few years, this is about 10 years out of law school, I said, enough is enough. And I decided to file for bankruptcy. And at that point in my life, things were so dire and just terrible that I could not even afford the legal fees. You know, I was calling around to different attorneys and they're telling me, oh, you know, $1,500, $2,000, $2,500. So the fees they were quoting me were making my head spin, right? So I'm like, I don't have, like, how long is it going to take me to save up this money to be able to pay for an attorney? So I was like, too broke to go broke. So my boyfriend at the time, he just could not understand why a lawyer was stressed about finding a lawyer, right? Because he's like, lawyers are lawyer. Like, and I'm like, well, do you want a heart surgeon operating on your brain? And he's like, well, no, it's not the same. So anyway, that conversation sparked something in me to kind of want to figure it out on my own. So I taught myself bankruptcy law, and I stumbled upon something that nobody ever talks about, which is something called the undue hardship rule. So in that, the exception to the rule, there's a general rule that you can't discharge student loan debt in bankruptcy, but there's an exception that if you have something called undue hardship and you can prove all the elements of undue hardship, you would be entitled to a discharge. So I'm litigating this and learning as I go because I have no idea what I'm doing. I had never been in court before, you know what I mean? I was always doing entertainment stuff, doing contracts, copyright stuff, everything that related to music or intellectual property. So this area of law was a whole new game for me. Being inside of a courtroom, being in an adversarial process, I'm suing the United States Department of Education, essentially, and then also the holders of my private student loans. So fast forward, I ended up, even as a new kid on the block, have no idea what I'm doing. I was able to successfully wipe away $120,000 of my student loan debt. I had started with 156 and I settled it for 36,000 at zero interest. So after my success in my own case, I decided I want to help other people. This is something that nobody even understands. Even seasoned bankruptcy attorneys had no idea. They would stop me in the hallway in court, be like, you could do that? I'm like, yeah, I mean, these are seasoned bankruptcy attorneys who are blown away by the fact that there's something called the undue hardship exception. And then there's also rules about private student loans as well, but I'm not going to bore you guys with the details of, how to get rid of student loans. I mean, I think that anyone who is, in high school or looking to go to college should take my story as a cautionary tale as to, what not to do. Don't get into all this debt. Don't go into a field where you're not making any money. When I came out of law school, I was working for one of the biggest record companies in the world, right? Looking at huge contracts. I thought I was the woman, right? Like, I'm like, oh, I'm out here with Usher or whoever. And I was making less than my friends who were public school teachers, okay, out of law school. And I had already passed the bar, but I was so, just hyped about being, in the music industry. And I was thinking, I'm going to meet that right person or get that right opportunity and it's going to be no problem. But you can't live like that. You have to be practical. Like Rico mentioned, that you have to figure out, how much am I going to make, and figure out, does it make sense to go into this amount of debt to pay that, you know what I mean, to make this money. So, I believe, I didn't go through this for anything, for nothing. I do believe that this is, what I'm meant to be doing. I went through my struggle so that I could help other people not be in this struggle. And, for the past, I filed my own bankruptcy in 2013. So I've been doing this now for almost 8 years. Like, after I finished my own case, I kind of jumped right into representing other people. I've been able to help people settle or discharge over $1 million of student loan debt. I teach other attorneys. I teach continuing legal education courses on the subject. So this is something I'm really passionate about. And I'll just end with, this slide, which is basically my mission is to educate and and provide support to anyone in this position. And this is a quote from Maya Angelou: when you get, give, and when you learn, teach. So not only, am I passionate about obviously practicing law and, helping people who are in debt, but also teaching and empowering people with, with the information and the tools they need to, navigate the world of student loans, figuring out what loan forgiveness program they may qualify for, figuring out, oh, maybe they do qualify to have it discharged in bankruptcy. So that's basically my story in a nutshell. Of course, my contact information will be available. So if anyone, has questions or wants to reach out to me, but my hope is that you would never need someone like me. So I'm here to, teach you about how to avoid, this situation. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Natalie. That is really inspiring. And as Natalie said, we'll share her information and we'll share Fausto's information, and you can reach out. But meanwhile, while everybody's still here, if you do have questions, please share them in the chat. We have another question from LaToya, and I'll just throw this out to everybody, anyone who wants to answer it. So, when you're looking for, how do you even start? How do you Google for scholarships? Is there a list or an app where you can find all these scholarship opportunities? How do you do the search? Anybody who wants to take a stab at that? Fausto, go ahead.
Google is a wonderful resource. Yes, literally all you have to do is type in scholarships. There's scholarships, or again, for everything, type in knitting scholarships, right? Type in athletic scholarships, type in, or, artist scholarships. You really, all you have to do is literally Google. The only thing, again, that I'm warning is, no, you don't have to pay to apply to any scholarship. They may ask for your email or your address, but you don't have to give anyone your social security number, for example. Your social security number is reserved only for government purposes, so only FAFSA and CSS and whatever college it is that you're applying to needs that information. So once again, yes, you can go ahead and Google any scholarship. So for example, I mentioned a few, so like the Hispanic Scholarship Fund will have a list of scholarships. The United Negro College Fund will have a list of scholarships. The Asian and Pacific Islander Association will have a bunch of scholarships, and there was one more, the American Indian Graduate Center. So again, even there are also affinity group or scholarships for different ethnic groups. One more thing that I wanted to say, just in case anyone else knows anyone who may be a DACA recipient, right? So I did mention that in order to apply for federal financial aid, you either have to be a US citizen or a permanent resident. However, there are some colleges that have their own funds, stashed away for DACA recipients. There are scholarships for DACA recipients. So it is still a possibility for students who are not US citizens or permanent residents to also attend college and not have to accrue debt.
Good. Does anyone else have anything to share about where you might start in researching for scholarships? If not, then we'll move on to the next question, which is, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna throw out real quick one place that I started, and I hope it works the same in New York. I just started with my guidance counselor. They usually have really good resources. They tend to have a long list of scholarships, and also if there's schools that you're interested in, reaching out to those schools, they might even put you in touch with some organizations on campus or some type of the right word is an affinity group, but I can't think of what the right word is. They put you in touch with some of those organizations on campus, and some of those organizations may even have scholarships or information on where to get scholarships. So it's usually, in addition to everything that Fausto mentioned, it's like reaching out, like using the resources that are already available, your guidance counselor and like schools.
We had another question about, could you just reiterate what the CSS is and how is that different from FAFSA?
So the CSS profile stands for College Scholarship Service Profile. And the CSS profile is generally required by private colleges or universities. So for example, Columbia University or Swarthmore College may require you to complete the FAFSA. So they will all require you to complete the the free application for federal student aid. And then the private ones may require one more application, and that is the CSS profile. Once again, there are fee waivers for all of these things, for applications to college, for applications to the CSS profile. So please make sure that you are asking and requesting them.
Okay, good, thank you. And then Itzy has a question. Is it a good idea to start thinking about scholarships in freshman year of high school? And I presume the answer is yes, certainly for thinking about scholarships and other ways to pay college.
For thinking about scholarships, yes, but freshman year of high school, you may actually not find too many. There may be a handful, but most scholarships generally most scholarship programs rather start accepting applications when you are in senior year. Some in your junior year, but generally, in my experience at the very least, those are the ones that require you to conduct some sort of research. So like, for example, I think Intel had a scholarship, and the company Siemens also had a scholarship, and those you actually had to submit some sort of like scientific paper or scientific work that you had done in high school in order to qualify for them.
Okay. And Natalie is sharing another website that is a good resource for scholarships called MyScholarly, MySchoolly.com, and we'll share that and all the other information that's been shared tonight in an email to everyone tomorrow, and you'll have contact information to reach out to individual panelists too. So we have a question from Jacqueline about the fee waivers. Now, how does a student go about getting a fee waiver, and are there certain income levels that you have to qualify for that? Fausto, go ahead.
Yes, sometimes there are certain income levels, but again, it can be different for different colleges. So you would generally you would request it from the college if I'm not mistaken, right? So they may ask like, oh, if the application is $80, $90, you can email someone and ask for a fee waiver. I think back in my day it was the College Board that used to give these fee waivers for college applications.
Okay, and let's see. When you're dealing with your high school counselor, guidance counselor, how much help can they be, and what do you think you should be asking them for? Anybody remember what that experience was like? Fausto, go ahead.
I remember my senior year of high school, my college counselor had sort of like a stand with any of the scholarship applications or scholarship information or brochures that he received. And so we could just walk into to his office and look through and pick whatever. Sometimes he actually had a few in mind for specific students, and then there are some scholarships where your guidance counselor or your college counselor actually have to nominate you. So those are the types of things that you can ask, and your guidance counselor, especially your senior guidance counselor or your college counselor, should have information about how to apply for college and scholarships.
Okay, and anybody else want to share anything? Okay, sorry, I just didn't want to wanted to make sure I didn't miss anyone. Well, we've run a little bit over time, so if there are no other questions, we'll wrap up. But again, we will email everybody who was on the call today with the Fausto's presentation and Natalie's information and a way to contact any of the panelists if you have specific questions that you want to reach out to somebody about. We have one more question coming in. Latoya says, thank you all. And of course, we want to extend our thanks to everybody who attended, as well as all of the panelists. We hope that you learned a lot. I know this is a very daunting subject, and It'll take much research and gathering documents and working through, but eventually it'll pay off and it'll be very worthwhile for everybody. So thank you again for joining us, and have a great evening. And watch out for future events.
All right, good night. Thanks.
Thank
for
you,
having us.
everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a
Everyone.
great evening.